Welcome to Headline Hub Updates. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. The news hit the nation in an instant. Supreme Court strikes down Trump-era tariffs. The headlines flashed across every major network, and the story dominated the airwaves, capturing the attention of millions. Screens everywhere lit up, and for a moment, America paused. In airports, coffee shops, and living rooms, people stopped what they were doing to absorb the magnitude of the decision. In boardrooms and around kitchen tables, the implications began to sink in. Conversations turned serious as families, executives, and workers tried to make sense of what this would mean for their futures. Years of contentious trade policy were swept away by a single ruling. Decades of debate, negotiation, and protest seemed to dissolve overnight, replaced by a new legal reality. The economic walls built on national security grounds were declared unconstitutional, sending shockwaves through politics and finance. Markets reacted instantly, and politicians scrambled to respond to the sudden shift. Importers and consumer groups celebrated, seeing a chance to lower costs and ease inflation. For many, it felt like a long-awaited victory that could bring relief to struggling households and businesses. On the New York Stock Exchange, traders cheered as manufacturing and retail stocks soared. The optimism was palpable, with investors betting on a new era of growth and opportunity. But in industrial towns, the mood was grim. Union leaders and workers felt betrayed, fearing a flood of cheap imports. For them, the ruling threatened jobs, livelihoods, and the future of American manufacturing. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers scrambled to frame the narrative. Was this a check on executive power or an attack on national security? The halls of Congress buzzed with urgent debate and political maneuvering. The debate reignited fierce arguments about the separation of powers and what it means to put America first. Across the country, Americans questioned the balance between economic freedom and national protection. The court's decision didn't just end a policy, it set off a political firestorm. Across newsrooms, social media, and the halls of power, the nation braced for the next chapter in a deeply divided debate. To understand the impact of the Trump-era tariffs, we need to look back at how U.S. trade policy has evolved over the decades. For years, the United States championed free trade, forging global agreements and opening markets. But in 2018, a dramatic shift began. The Trump administration introduced sweeping tariffs, most notably the Section 232 tariffs, which slapped a 25% tax on imported steel and a 10% tax on aluminum. These measures were designed to make foreign metals more expensive, giving American producers a competitive edge. The administration invoked a rarely used 1962 law, arguing that national security depended on a robust domestic metals industry. The idea was that relying too much on foreign steel and aluminum could leave the U.S. vulnerable in times of crisis. The primary goal was to shield American manufacturers from a flood of cheaper imports, especially those coming from China, which had been accused of dumping excess steel into global markets. These tariffs became a cornerstone of the America First agenda, signaling a break from decades of bipartisan support for free trade and globalization. But the tariffs didn't stop with metals. Soon, the administration expanded them to cover hundreds of billions of dollars in Chinese goods, ranging from electronics and machinery to clothing and household items. The justification for these broader tariffs shifted. Now, the focus was on punishing China for what the U.S. called unfair trade practices, like forced technology transfers, intellectual property theft, and state subsidies that distorted global markets. This marked a dramatic departure from previous administrations, embracing protectionism and sparking friction not just with rivals, but also with long-standing allies. In response, countries like Canada, Mexico, and the European Union hit back with their own retaliatory tariffs, targeting American exports and escalating the trade conflict. For decades, the U.S. had led the charge for free trade, helping to shape the global trading system. Now, it was actively rewriting the rules and challenging the very institutions it once championed. The Trump-era tariffs quickly became a symbol of a new, more confrontational approach to global commerce, one that prioritized American interests, even at the risk of sparking a trade war. Allies found themselves caught in the crossfire, as global supply chains were disrupted and the world's trading system was thrown into uncertainty and turmoil. The stage was set for a series of legal and political showdowns, both at home and on the world stage, as the consequences of these tariffs rippled across the globe. The effects of the tariffs rippled across the entire economy, touching nearly every sector and community in the country. Domestic steel and aluminum producers experienced a short-term boost, reopened mills, new jobs, and a sense of renewed hope in towns that had struggled for years. But for manufacturers who relied on those metals, costs soared dramatically. Many businesses faced tough choices: either absorb the higher expenses or pass them on to consumers, which often meant raising prices. As a result, prices climbed on cars, appliances, and everyday goods. These increases hit lower and middle-income families the hardest, making it more difficult for them to afford basic necessities. The tariffs effectively acted as a regressive tax, fueling inflation and squeezing household budgets across the nation. Many families found themselves cutting back, struggling to keep up with rising costs. Internationally, America's trading partners retaliated, targeting iconic American exports like bourbon, motorcycles, and agricultural products. This backlash hurt both farmers and manufacturers, who suddenly faced new barriers abroad. Soybean exports to China plummeted, devastating Midwest agriculture. Farmers watched as their crops piled up unsold, and rural communities felt the sting of lost income. The tariffs strained diplomatic ties, leading to tense negotiations and undermining the global trading system. Allies questioned America's commitment to free trade and cooperation. Politically, the tariffs became a rallying cry for those left behind by globalization, fueling passionate debates and deepening divisions, even within the Republican Party, where not everyone agreed on the policy. Some Democrats in industrial states broke ranks to support protectionism, redrawing political alliances and shifting the traditional lines between parties. The tariffs weren't just another policy, they were a bold statement, reshaping America's role in the world and signaling a new era of economic nationalism. The fallout was widespread economic pain for many, and a new era of political polarization that would shape debates for years to come. With tensions rising, the stage was set for a legal reckoning that would test the limits of presidential power and the future of American trade policy. The legal battle reached the Supreme Court after years of challenges from importers and businesses. The core argument: the president had overstepped, using national security as a pretext to impose tariffs, power that belongs to Congress. In a 6-3 decision, the court agreed, ruling that the executive's use of national security was too broad. The majority opinion clarified only a direct, credible threat to defense justifies such tariffs, not economic competition. The ruling didn't strike down the 1962 law, but set a higher bar for invoking national security and trade. The president's ability to bypass Congress with tariffs was sharply limited. Dissenting justices warned this would tie the hands of future presidents in real crises. The decision drew a clear line. Congress, not the president, controls trade policy. The constitutional debate over separation of powers was settled, at least for now. The tariff debate split the nation. Supporters, often in industrial towns, saw tariffs as overdue protection for American workers, a way to fight unfair foreign practices and revive communities. They accepted higher prices as the cost of rebuilding domestic industry. Critics, including free market conservatives and consumer groups, called tariffs a tax on Americans, raising prices and hurting competitiveness. They argued that protectionism damaged international relationships and invited retaliation. Instead, they favored working with allies to pressure countries like China through global institutions. For them, tariffs were a blunt tool that did more harm than good. The Supreme Court's decision did more than end tariffs. It shifted power back to Congress. For decades, Congress had ceded trade authority to the president for speed and flexibility. Now the court's ruling forces presidents to seek congressional approval for broad tariffs. Trade policy will once again require public debate, hearings, and compromise. This process is slower, but more democratic and accountable. Lawmakers must now take clear stances, and lobbyists will focus their efforts on Capitol Hill. The era of unilateral trade policy from the Oval Office is over. The balance of power has returned to the constitutional design. For consumers, the end of tariffs means lower prices on everything from cars to electronics. It's like a tax cut, easing inflation and stretching paychecks further. Businesses that rely on imports will see costs drop, boosting profits and potentially creating jobs. But domestic steel and aluminum producers now face tough global competition, risking layoffs and closures. The impact on workers is mixed. Some industries will benefit, others will struggle. The decision could spur investment and confidence as trade uncertainty fades. Export markets may reopen, helping farmers and manufacturers. The broader economy stands to gain, but some communities will need support to adapt. The ruling highlights the tension between broad economic benefits and protecting vulnerable industries. America's place in global trade is shifting, again. The effects will be felt in every household and workplace. This decision is about more than economics. It reshapes American democracy and trade. By reining in executive power, the court returns trade policy to Congress, making it more deliberate and stable. Sweeping changes will now require consensus, reducing the risk of abrupt shifts. The ruling sparks a national debate. Will America return to free trade leadership or seek a new strategic approach? It's a reaffirmation of checks and balances. Major economic decisions must go through elected representatives. But a Congress-led process can be slow and gridlocked, making rapid responses harder. Crafting a long-term strategy will demand bipartisanship and compromise. The challenge: use this restored authority wisely, forging a trade policy that reflects the nation's diverse interests. The future of U.S. trade will be shaped by debate, not decree. The world is watching to see which path America chooses. The nation now faces both risks and opportunities. Domestic industries losing tariff protection may struggle, risking jobs and economic hardship in vulnerable communities. Political divisions could deepen, with some seeing the court's move as a blow to working Americans. A gridlocked Congress could leave trade policy in limbo, unable to respond to global challenges. But the opportunities are real. Lower costs for consumers, renewed ties with allies, and a more dynamic economy. The U.S. can now rebuild trust abroad and work collectively to address unfair trade practices. Investment and innovation may flourish in a more predictable trade environment. The Supreme Court's decision is a new beginning, a chance to build smarter, more inclusive trade policy. The challenge is to balance global engagement with support for those left behind. America's next chapter in trade will be written by its leaders and its people.